Hi there, my name is Nick Francis. I'm the Chief Technology and Marketing Officer for Brooklyn Vendor Assurance. And today I'm going to take you through what's the biggest gap left by your CRM, S2C or P2P platform and why this is a problem in post-contract management.
Vendor Ops, leveling up your vendor management.
So initially you have this concept of, at the beginning of this phase, an expected value that you're going to get out of something. So when you look to outsource or go out for a product or a service, the shortlisted vendors that you look to deal with throughout that process, in the pre-deal negotiation, you're always looking to increase the value. So what may be of low value to the supplier, maybe of higher value to you, and is negotiation table stakes for doing this deal, then you'll get increased value out of that and a better deal than you thought potentially. All that effort is generally derived from the procurement and commercial and legal teams up to a point that you get it to the maximum amount of value that you can squeeze out of the supplier, and then you sign the deal. What happens in a lot of cases at that point, there then becomes this kind of lag. And depending on how defined the operating model is, or the transfer process, handover process between what is pre-deal negotiation from procurement and commercial standpoint into the business unit for implementation, will then potentially result in this drop-off through this onboarding period. And then some organisations that are larger with a poorly defined process in some complex deals case may arc the bottom of this drop-off, so potentially dropping down as much as 30% in value. It's been seen in the past in some deals, or potentially dropping off only as much as sort of 15% in value before there's that period of uncertainty and risk, depending on the type of the organisation, as I said, the processes and the recovery, how that comes back and starts then going up into a performance state. And then once it sort of goes through implementation into the run state that is for the rest of the contract essentially. And the idea is to get it up to sort of this 30% plus in deal value. That said, when this happens and this drop off takes place, it is rare to then ever get that deal value back, either up to the expected value. So this recovery would be at absolute best in this situation. And this is predominantly caused by, like I said, processes, but also from a system perspective. And the gap that we look at here from a digital perspective is that you have this drop off in tooling from this perspective. So CRM, P2P and S2C don't really help you in operationalising complex contracts post-deal. And the lack of this dedicated platform is what would exacerbate this timeline here. And it is probably a bridge too far for what is typically known as a PPM tool, so a portfolio and project management tool like Microsoft Project, to pick up something from a contract, big legalese document, and then distill that down into a scope that's deliverable by many, many people over an extended period of time. It might help somewhat during the implementation to stop dropping to the bottom of this curve, but it's very hard to use something like that on an ongoing basis to keep the value of the deal up. So in summary, where are the gotcha points in this process? Well, as I said here, there's this lag between signing and actually doing something about it, depending on how badly or well the operating model is defined and those handover processes and those matrix managed teams work together. This may take an undeterminable period of time before you start onboarding, and depending what processes are in the onboarding phase, from the initial inherent risk through to the due diligence and the risk assessments done at the onboarding phase, how that then gets tracked and created in the digital sense to then have this deal digitized, ready for implementation and ready for delivery on an ongoing basis. And that's this period of uncertainty and risk that you can't account for, leading to then potentially recovery time. So there's a risk there in terms of the effort needed to recover this, which needs to consider many factors: team dynamics, clarity of process, again, platforms in place to support the transition, and then looking at the amount of time lost recovering that value and momentum back to where it was originally required to be as such. So moving on from that, if we look at taking them away and then saying, well, how would we get from left to right without this drop off, with a consideration of risk assessments, contract metadata extraction, effective relationship management, and then collaboration and performance tracking? What we tend to see is that needs to disappear, and you need a platform that's going to underpin and fulfill that gap and potentially replace the need for this PPM tool. Obviously not going to replace the need for your CRM and P2P and S2C platform, but very quickly, once that deal's signed, to then become part of this holistic ecosystem that Brooklyn Vendor Assurance provides, which covers all those bases, all the way through from digitized onboarding, extracting all the metadata in the deal, and then not only for implementation, but then continuing for the life cycle of the deal, keeping teams like honest, on point, delivering value, and avoiding, as you saw in the previous slides, that absolute drop off that, even though the graphic indicated it, a lot of companies just don't recover the value in that first several months of onboarding. And that's a typical amount of time that we do see that there's that sort of 5, 6, 7 month lag, which there are a lot of unknown risks come into in terms of delivery. I hope that was useful. If you want to get in touch, please provide feedback. Otherwise, happy to hear your comments. Like, share, subscribe, look at our YouTube channel, follow us on LinkedIn. We're also on Twitter, or you can do it the old-fashioned way and hit the website and fill out a form, and we're happy to come and talk to you about the extra bells and whistles that there are in the product. Thank you.
To keep up with the latest vendor ops news, subscribe here and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Links in the description below.